recently was New Year's Eve. And so I worked New Year's Eve. I worked till 1 a.m. New Year's Eve. It was great. I had a great time. Most people would be like, oh my gosh, you had to work on New Year's Eve. I'm like, no, that's like my favorite part of the job. I don't think I've missed a New Year's Eve event in years. Just seeing all those people, seeing them have fun, getting to help, be in the kitchen, run food. The next day, it's amazing when I look back on the list of notes I have from that night working. So it's not just about being there to help, but then also taking notes while I was there in working in the business and seeing what needs improvement or what are we doing great at. And that's always, I think, the most beneficial part of getting on the ground floor during those operation hours.
This episode is brought to you by NewView.
NewView is a team of attractions experts providing an all-in-one reporting suite for attractions businesses.
Their reporting solution empowers attraction leaders to make well-informed decisions based on real-time data.
NewView also builds slick websites that elevates your digital guest experience and provides strategic support to help you with booking systems and all of your IT needs.
For more information, go to newview.com. That's NEW-VUE.com.
Welcome to the Attraction Pros Podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman. I am obsessed with the guest experience and helping attractions make that their top priority for success.
And I'm Matt Heller. I am passionate about organizational effectiveness, leadership development, and employee engagement.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the Attraction Pros Podcast. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
It's going fantastically, Josh. How are you?
Well, I'm also fantastically.
Oh, good.
I think you say fantastically when I ask you when I open the episode, but you say fantastic when you open the episode and then I ask you second. I don't have any data to support whether that's true or not, but
I think we have lots of episodes as data.
I have a lot of data, but I did not look at it in the time that I just thought of it 10 seconds ago.
Well, I think it's maybe because the way you ask, right? You say, how are you doing? Or no, what do you say? How's it going?
Yeah. How's it going?
But I think when I start, maybe you say, how are you?
You. Interesting.
So
there
you go.
Not what we intended to talk about today. I have a question for you, Matt.
Yes, take it away.
Have you ever dreamed of or considered or entertained the idea of being in politics?
No. The closest I ever got, which I think we've talked about, was being the secretary for my homeowners association. And I wanted to poke my eyes out. So that's a no.
As the former secretary of my homeowners association, and until recently, the treasurer of my association, both of which positions I was voluntold into being, I understand the sentiment. I know exactly how you feel.
Yes. I think if I had the desire to go into public servitude, if that's a word, and I, ran for a position and I got elected, I think it would have been different, but I was also voluntold to be the secretary of the HOA. So I think we probably both went into those positions kind of reluctantly, which I know for me absolutely impacted my experience.
It will probably impact the constituents of your association's experience as well, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah.
No. Why do you ask?
The reason I ask is because our guest today is Kyle Allison. He's the owner of Altitude 1291. He's the director of fun for Allison's Fun Incorporated. And well, he was born into the hospitality industry. He was born into entrepreneurship. He was born into multiple generations of family businesses which of course naturally means that he has served in his local government community as well. No, he talks about how he says he never wants to be considered a politician, but he has spent time serving his community on the city council. And he also talked about how that dovetailed nicely into being on IAPA's government affairs committee. And actually, the things he talked about were very interesting for someone who is distinctly not a politician, yet has spent some time in his local politics.
But I also really appreciated how he tied it also back to the business, saying, being involved in the community is just good for business, which I agree with. But he also talked about, kind of from a recruiting standpoint, the more you know about the community, the more you can, reach out to people when it's time to hire different people. And so I really felt that was a fascinating angle that maybe, some people are looking at, maybe some people aren't.
Yes. And, we definitely cannot talk about hospitality, entrepreneurship, family business, government without, of course, also talking about haircuts.
It's a natural line, right? That we have to talk about them.
He and his wife have opened franchises of children's haircut stores, and he makes the direct connection from hospitality and from the businesses that he operates into operating these franchises, which was a really fascinating. I think it was a surprise for both of us to hear that part of it, and maybe we just spoiled that surprise for the listening audience right now. But yes, haircuts are going to come up in this interview.
Absolutely, as are overcoming staffing challenges, and whether it was pandemic related or just the staffing challenges that every business seems to have at one time or another. Kyle really talks about the fact that it's not just about money, it's about creating an environment where people want to be there and they want to be part of something. And that can really be a competitive advantage.
Mm-hmm. And he also talks about, what I really liked that he talked about is how he would never ask somebody to do something that he wouldn't do himself. And that means that he's very present on the floor in his facilities. And that helps, when it comes to recruiting, when it comes to training, that he is, just as proficient as the team members that he needs to operate his business.
And well, you know what? I was going to say something, but I'm not going to spoil that surprise. So with that, should we get to this interview with Kyle?
I think that we should put our names in the ballot box and pull the lever and vote for us as politicians of the Attraction Pros podcast.
I'm going to vote for Kyle as our guest.
Me too. Hey, Kyle, welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast. We are so excited to have you on today. How are you?
Doing well, doing well.
Excellent. Well, to get this started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us about your background and your career.
Sure. My name's Kyle Allison. I've been in the business since I was born, I like to say. I was born into the hospitality business as I grew up in a company that, with my parents, that did inflatable rentals. Like started off with just one moon bounce, and my dad grew it to multi-million-dollar company renting now hundreds of moon bounces, small carnival rides, that kind of stuff. But kind of grew up in the business here in Oklahoma, lived in Oklahoma my entire life, except for a little bit of time for college. Went to high school here, graduated, ran off to Denver, Colorado, lived there for a few years, went to school out there, and then kind of came back to join the family business. I knew I'd always come back and join the family business, but I wanted to get away and kind of see the corporate world and see if I liked it. And so went to school, interned with a lot of big companies, figured out I didn't like big companies. I liked small business, liked family-owned stuff. So ventured back to Oklahoma City, and here we are now, just living the dream and making more companies as we go.
So Kyle, can you tell us a little bit more about some of those companies that you've created over the years?
Yeah, so I like to say everything we do is kind of centered around hospitality. If I look at something that I want to do or something we want to invest in, ultimately it's got to be involved with people. We know we can take care of people. We know we can treat people right. We can treat our team members right. And generally that's about every business out there. Unfortunately, not all of them, but we don't sell widgets. We don't sell technology. We like to focus on businesses that have to do with people. And so, we had the business my dad started 30 years ago is still in business, doing corporate events as I work with that as well. And then we have our family entertainment center. We've opened up two of those over the last few years, and then most recently we purchased a franchise that does kids haircutting. And so it was kind of a random post-COVID investment. We thought, wow, we should really invest in stuff that doesn't get shut down during pandemics. And then we picked hair, and we're like, wait, that got shut down too. So, it's one of those things that, back we look back on, like, what were we thinking? But, we thought about, I have young kids. I have a 7 and 9-year-old girls, and it was always a chore to take them get their haircuts. And then we found this place that was specialized in kids' haircuts. And so, and you had to have a reservation. I was like, I had to have a reservation to get my kid's haircut. So then I realized we need these in my town. And so we ended up purchasing a franchise for one in our town. And then we ended up with a second one. And then we ended up with a third. So now we're at 3 locations here in the Oklahoma City area. And that was kind of our, when we looked at that business, we said, well, my wife and I have no idea how to cut hair. We don't want to cut hair. We never have, but it's about the people. As long as mom's happy, really the haircut doesn't have to be that good. I mean, obviously we cut good hair, but ultimately it's about taking care of mom and making sure that the child has a great experience. And so really, it's interesting how many similarities there are in that business. And then also in the hospitality and family entertainment business. It's just about taking care of people. And that's what we strive to do.
That's so fascinating, making the connection between haircuts and hospitality, which is probably one that might be less obvious to most people because it's not necessarily in the family entertainment space that
Right.
it's very much your bread and butter, but still so many of the core components of the operation of the organization and of the culture, particularly with hospitality. So I appreciate you sharing that. You talk about being born into a family of hospitality, but you're also born into a family of entrepreneurship as well. So I'm curious if you can talk about it from that lens too.
Yeah, that is, and that's kind of how I was brought up. I brought up working in my grandma's business as well. So when I was a little kid, my dad worked with his mom, and so I would go to work with my dad sometimes, and I'd be there and work in the business. And my grandma had a business, and next door to her business was my grandpa's business, and he had a transmission repair shop. And so I'd walk over to the transmission repair shop, and I always tell people I was just like my dad. We both walked over there a few times and said, we never want to repair cars in our life. And so we walked back over and walked back to the other business. And so that's the fun part of growing up around entrepreneurs and, learning to count money at a young age and learning to deal with customers and work with employees. And when you kind of grow up in that environment and you see it all the time, then that's just the way of life you want to be. And I'll never forget those few times that I have worked outside of the family-owned business. I'm like, oh, that's not how you would handle it in a family-owned business or in a small mom and pop shop. And I call us a small mom and pop shop because we still feel that way. We've grown over the years, but we still want to be like a mom and pop.
Well, and excuse me, that leads to a question of back when you said you didn't want to work with those larger corporations. What was it about those environments that just kind of rubbed you the wrong way?
I would say the number one thing that I did not like about corporate, and that's what I never wanted to happen in our business, is that a decision couldn't be made without 3 emails, 3 phone calls, 3 meetings, working up the chain. It's like you couldn't make a decision. Not one person can make a decision. It was very climbing the ladder type communication. And I just never want that. I think that to be nimble and to be very, approachable and know that someone can walk into my office and ask me a question. And yes, I may not give the answer right then, but they're going to have an answer very quickly. And that's what I always hope that we can do. I didn't like not knowing what was going to happen the next day, or, was there going to be a big corporate layoff? Because I worked in those around, the 9/11 type time frame. And so what was it going to be? Oh, now they're going to do this, or that was, I never forget too, one time being in the office and they're like, well, the intern will go get you coffee. I'm like, no, I can go get coffee. Like, why would I ever have someone go get my coffee for me? That's a horrible idea. And they're like, well, that's just what we do. I'm like, well, that's just not how we do it. So that was always one of those things that I just, it was very informative though. I'm glad I learned a lot And I won't say that I would never go back and work for corporate again, but it definitely was a good experience. And I've learned a lot of things in those days and those years that I brought back and then implemented into our companies. And I think that's important as well as learning the different ways besides just the way you're doing it.
I'm curious if we can go a little bit deeper into that, and even, thinking, kind of have my gears turning of that example of the intern can go get you coffee, and particularly your reaction to that. Curious as far as how that has influenced your leadership style into what you do today, of knowing you've maybe pulled some lessons from that space, but also operating in a distinctly different and more kind of, like you said, the mom and pop or the independent business owner mentality.
Yeah, it's tough because I struggle with wanting to do everything myself, but knowing I can't. Because we do have to have help, we do have to delegate, but I never want to be that leader who won't do something because there's someone else there to do it for me. I feel like everything I've done, or everything I asked someone to do, I've pretty much done myself. I'm pretty sure it's probably not everything if it's a specialized item. I'm not good at repairing arcade machines, but I will climb in there and try. But my texts often say that I do more damage than I did help. But I think that I would never ask someone to go do something I've not done before. And it also helps me to know that, like once I've done it, to know, well, A, how long it should take them to do it, what are the supplies needed, what is the compensation needed for that. And so I think that's something that I've learned. And then I've also been told sometimes, well, Kyle, last time you did that was 10 years ago. Things have changed. So, I learned that way as well. But it goes down to my leadership style is absolutely love being on the floor in the environment with the customer. And that's like my favorite thing. I hate sitting behind a computer. I hate the, the work that we have to do as business owners at times behind the computer and the financials and all that. I love being on the floor of the businesses and seeing firsthand what's going on. Nothing makes me more excited than being at an event where all these kids are coming into our FEC or another environment and seeing them all have a great time, and adults as well.
So thinking about you running all these businesses, I'm guessing you're not going to be cutting hair, but how often do you get to experience that? What, like you just talked about, being on the floor, given that you do have other responsibilities within the businesses?
Yeah, and that's probably been my biggest challenge over the last, 4 or 5 years, especially post-COVID. We all had a lot of time during COVID to kind of reflect on things. But getting around and being involved, being on the floor. I hate when I go into a company that we operate and someone doesn't know who I am, because that means I've not been around enough. It's kind of my philosophy on that. And so, for instance, our three haircut locations, the furthest one's only about 45 minutes away, but still it's a 45-minute drive each way. And, there's still times I love to just drop in, or if I'm at a meeting in that area, I really have no need in those companies to really be in the business. All of it can be done remotely and more of an investment purpose, but it is still good to be there and to get to know the people. And then, get into an event. Like even if I see our event schedule for the week and I see we have a big event on Friday night and they don't really need my help. They'll say, we don't need your help for this event. We don't need you. Still, dropping in and hanging out for the first hour and a half, 2 hours of the event and helping and being there. It is interesting. It's a great part of what we do. And for instance, I know this is not, we're recording this now, but recently was New Year's Eve. And so I worked New Year's Eve. I worked till 1 a.m. New Year's Eve. It was great. I had a great time. Most people would be like, oh my gosh, you had to work on New Year's Eve. I'm like, no, that's like my favorite part of the job. I don't think I've missed a New Year's Eve event in years. Just seeing all those people, seeing them have fun, getting to help, be in the kitchen, run food. The next day, it's amazing when I look back on the list of notes I have from that night working. So it's not just about being there to help, but then also taking notes while I was there and working in the business and seeing what needs improvement or what are we doing great at. And that's always, I think, the most beneficial part of getting on the ground floor during those operation hours.
So this might be pulling back a little bit, but you've mentioned the two FECs. Curious if you can tell us more about them.
Sure. Yeah. So when I was actually in college, my parents started our first family entertainment center. we've always operated for 30 years, was operated this equipment rental company, amusement equipment. And as we grew, we're doing more and more events outside of kind of the Oklahoma City Metroplex. We travel all across kind of this Midwestern states. And but we really didn't service a lot of stuff here in our own hometown because we mostly do larger events. And so my parents were kind of thinking of a way to be able to, give back and build something in the community. And that's when we started Andy Alligators. And it was a traditional outdoor family entertainment center. Had your go-karts, your batting cages, miniature golf, all those traditional elements with a smaller interior portion, probably only about 10,000 square feet of inside stuff. Um, so we operated that, and then right prior, so around 5 years ago is when we opened up Altitude 1291, which is our newer FEC, which is kind of the complete opposite and more like the FECs you see now that are indoor. And so it's about 30,000 square feet of indoor attractions and no attractions outside. There we have a patio with a cool kind of bar area outside, but it's all indoor. And so we opened up that facility, unfortunately, about 3 months before COVID hit. And so that was a challenge. But when we went into COVID, we had two family entertainment centers, and then we exited COVID with just one. And it was an interesting timing and split that our outdoor FEC was right in the area of a large turnpike improvement going on. And so it was one of those times when we looked at if right now, if you're down right now because you're closed because of COVID, can you make lemonade out of lemons, as I say? And can we do something about this? And so we looked at, as a family, keeping our Altitude 1291 location, and then we ultimately closed the one in Andy Alligators, and it's now part of a highway expansion project. And so as the state needed that land, it made sense for them to purchase that land and expand the system. And it was the right time for us because, as I've said before, we're not a big corporation. And when we did not know the unknowns of what the next step was, we wanted to focus on what we knew we could keep going and be successful at. And that was Altitude 1291, which is our FEC that we currently operate.
So Kyle, you've mentioned COVID a couple times, and I don't want this to be about COVID, but I know that you've been in the industry for a long time, and obviously COVID was one of the big disruptors. I'm curious, a lot of things have changed, and a lot of things have changed since COVID, but since you've been in this since birth, what are some things that have not changed about the hospitality and entertainment business?
That's a great question. Because we always want to look at the positive coming out of, disruptions like that. I think people ultimately still want to have fun. They want to have an experience. They want to get out of the house. They want to get out of work. If there's people doing team building parties and work events, and those were things that people were wanting to do. And we saw that, we saw that pent up demand afterwards, the whole industry did. And now we're just kind of seeing kind of the end of that pent up demand. So that's been something. I think, the FEC segment was already growing before the pandemic. And it was really about 2 years before was when things started really taking off with some of the bigger names expanding, like your Main Events and your Dave & Buster's, the bigger chains, kind of started expanding big a couple years before that. And so that helped a lot of people like us because as the big chains grow, that gets people excited about entertainment, out of home entertainment, and they want to get out and enjoy things like us. And so I think that is the one thing that didn't really stop during COVID is the trajectory of the family entertainment industry just kept going up. And I think it would have had there been a COVID or not been a COVID, pandemic. It would have kept going. And so that's, I think, some of the positive things that have not changed since then.
Mm.
One of the things due in part to the pandemic was a very big, I would say, labor scramble for the entire industry of all of hospitality and including family entertainment. Curious as far as any staffing challenges that you've encountered over the last few years at Altitude 1291 and how you've been able to overcome them and what actions you've taken.
Yeah, we went into the pandemic with as a family, we sit around, when all this stuff happens, you sit around, at least we do as a family, we sit around, and my dad's office is literally at the wall across from mine. And my wife is often here at the office as well. And so we like come together in a room and look at each other like, what are we gonna do type situation. And one of the things we always do is we want to take care of our people and the people who work with us. And how do we take care of them? And so we know when this thing ends, because at that point we didn't know when it was going to end, that they are still there, so we can take care of our guests, our customers. And we tried to do what we could to keep people on, to help them navigate the assistance they needed. And so that helped us because then we emerged out of the pandemic with the majority of our full-time or our management team still intact. And so that allowed us really just to focus on the hourly staff that was going to have to be rebuilt. And yes, it was a challenge. I would say I will always, you talked about earlier about kind of my leadership style and how I like to always be on the ground and helping. That was very helpful because then I still knew everything. I mean, I remember one night in the kitchen, it was just me cooking, flipping burgers and cooking food. And how had I not been involved, I would have known that stuff. And so as we emerged out there, we had challenges. And I tell people one of the hardest thing about being a family-owned business is we don't have the financial resources that a large company has. And so when you have, for instance, a Wendy's opens up in front of us at altitude 1291, and all of our employees are like, wait, I can make, $17 an hour over there, flipping burgers or washing dishes or taking orders to the drive-through. And our financial model was not able to do that. I mean, we're in the Midwest, we're in a smaller market. That wasn't our financial model. So we couldn't just throw money at people like most of these large companies were doing. We had to figure out ways to create that team atmosphere where they wanted to be involved. You use the whole pizza party deal. But how can we create that environment of people wanting to be there and having a good time, but not giving them pizza parties, giving them barbecue parties? No. So how do we create that kind of family environment to where we can help? And a lot of that was flexibility. I mean, I remember the days before before the pandemic was, here's your schedule, here's what it is. You can't call off, you can't do anything wrong, you'll get fired. Well, after that, it was, okay, so, if you only want to work these 2 days a week, that's great. Okay, you need off this Saturday? Fine. Oh, you only want to work days, no weekends? That's fine. Like, it was very interesting the way our industry had to change the way we worked with our team members and the way we just scheduled and staffed. And so, that was a challenging part, but getting back to your question, I feel like things have changed, and people who have stuck around enjoy the environment that we hope we provided during those years, and things are getting better. I think we're on a uptick of employees now are wanting to work in places where they feel valued and where they feel like they maybe have a future. And we can, as a family entertainment center, provide those jobs for youth that most places don't want. They don't want 16-year-olds or they don't want 18-year-olds. And that's something that we can do and we want to do. We want young employees. I personally love having young employees and teaching them, what we can do in the industry. And also, I have employees that started with us as 16-year-olds that graduated college and are now, engineers and big guys that are making triple what I'm making, but they loved coming up through the ranks. And that's what we love seeing, is we love seeing that growth and, knowing that our industry is not just an entry-level industry. There's all levels of involvement and all levels of pay. I mean, this is not just an hourly industry.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Kyle, I'm very glad to hear your stance on pizza parties. Even if you call it a barbecue party, that's okay, but no pizza parties. My other question was kind of going back to the change in the way that you're interacting with your staff when it comes to, oh, you only want to work 2 days, or you have this different, schedule requirement. What did it take to kind of shift that mindset? Because I'm still working with people and dealing with people who are like, no, this is your schedule and this is what you work, and they're getting upset that there's this new type of employee out there.
Yeah, I think flexibility is probably the biggest thing we learned coming out of COVID. When you look at it, you can put that word onto every piece of your business, whether it be financially, whether it be equipment, whether it be people. And I think it does cost you a little more to operate with more employees than that. I mean, if you look at, yeah, we may have 30 30 people on payroll at Altitude right now, but can we get away with probably using only 15 or 20? Yes, but we know they all aren't going to work 40 hours a week. They only may want to work 2, 3 days, and that's when we need them, and we need them in those peak periods. So it's something that I'd like to say is a training part as well. If you can be there in enough amount of time to learn your position and learn the training and stay perfect at it, then let's bring them in. Bring them in on those days that you need them. But yes, there is some inflexibility of the traditional world of no, you're going to work 4 or 5 days a week, and it's just not the same anymore. And we've embraced it.
So when you talk about having more employees on payroll, and that's an extra expense to be able to provide that flexibility. In the last 5 years, there's been a much higher demand for wage growth. And then you just talked about the extra emphasis on training. How do you wrap all of that together in something that is also very viable for the business too?
It's probably our biggest challenge. What is that? What's that number? Where can you go when you look at people say, well, we just need to pay them more. That's not always the answer. It's not just we need to pay them more. We've already talked about it's about the environment they're working in as well. But we look at that. We look at that part of, okay, we have this many employees. Do we need to hire more? What's that going to cost us? Do we have systems in place that maybe can help us save some money in those areas? So that is tough, ultimately looking at the bottom line that, we're lucky in the fact that we're not answering to a board of directors or Wall Street. But I'm still answering to the fact that I want to be in business for another 30 years. And so we have our ups and downs, and we learned that we make mistakes, and we say, okay, we have now, we can't spend that money, but here's where we can. And it's that, budgeting like a big company, but still being a small company and figuring out what works.
Well, I would imagine at any company level, it comes back to the return on investment, right? You're investing in those team members, you're investing in the training that you're putting them through, you're investing in more people maybe being on staff. And so you've got to be able to see a return in that. So I'm curious, do you see a return like in the guest satisfaction or in the efficiency of your operation when you can have a few more people on rather than, kind of short staffing yourself just to save a little bit of money?
Yes. I always say that some of those years following the pandemic, we had some of the best labor costs that we've ever had. And I personally hope we never see that again. It was great. It was profitable. It was great money, but I hope we never see our labor percentage down in the, teens, because that means we're not delivering the experience we needed to deliver. It is, you don't want people waiting. You don't want people that are knowledgeable about the occasion. I sometimes like to say, a lot of times when you go back and look at a customer or a guest complaint, it has something to do with someone told them something or something happened, and ultimately that person they're working with didn't know the particular rule or the particular way to how to operate that. And the only way to alleviate that is with training or with the knowledge of being there. Even if you train them, it's just doing it many times, you get to know it better. And so if we have all new employees or we have that way, then it's just going to be a high turnover. You're going to have less guest satisfaction, in my opinion. And so I think keeping those people around, I mean, for instance, I have one of our employees who only works Saturday nights. She only works one shift a week. But you know what? When we're on the wait list and she's working that bowl desk, she can work that bowl desk and put those people in the slots and take names and put them into where they need to go and move that calendar around better than anyone that I know, way better than me. And so I love it when she's there because I know our guests are going to get taken care of, and we're going to get more people through the lanes, which means more revenue and more people happy. And so there's often times when people say like that, she's like, I can only work one night a week because I have a full-time job doing this, or I have kids that I have to do this for. Okay, well, let's make it work. Now can I give you just a Tuesday morning shift? No, I'm not. That's not going to be a shift we can give you just every week. But if you want to, so that is when you have those people who you can work with that have the knowledge of your business, it ultimately is going to, come back to you tenfold because they're going to take care of the customer.
So tying that into, there's a few avenues sort of to go down, but kind of want to maybe hit all of them at once to some extent here, is the staff member that you talked about of work Saturday night, at the bowling counter. You also talk about guest complaints as well. And one of the things that I'm wondering too is with the way that you've been overcoming certain challenges of staffing, does it also allow you to reframe maybe what that role of that frontline team member is? I know one of the things that, one of the phrases that's been popular in the last few years is, is doing more with less, putting in more automation, putting in more technology, while at the same time, paying employees more. So that kind of brings up the question to say, well, if we have, if we're paying employees a higher rate, but there are certain things that they don't necessarily need to do as much anymore because technology is able to alleviate some of those job duties. Does that then allow more areas of the hospitality side of it? This is where the guest complaint piece of it comes in to say, our employees are going to have more empowerment, therefore responsibility for service recovery and managing guest complaints. As one example, I'm curious if that is part of the thought process and part of kind of the structure.
Yeah, I mean, I do see those issues when we had more automation, or we've added more automation, we've added more ways to order online or order or texting and, wait list stuff and booking online. There is less human interaction. So to me, there is more points of failure because we know people don't read you can put all you wanted on the whole terms and conditions. They're not going to read it. So if you have a person interacting with them and they walk up and they are talking with you, and you can just their demeanor, how they're talking, you can overcome those obstacles, in my opinion, by knowing what might be coming up next or what they're thinking about, or if they have a child with them and saying, well, you just purchased our all access pass that allows you to do everything in the building unlimited, but you bought it for your 5-year-old and they're not tall enough to do the majority of the stuff. Whereas if they went online and bought it, and yes, it says that online, they probably didn't read it. But once they bought it in store and someone was physically seeing the fact they had a 5-year-old with them that couldn't do half the stuff, oh, thank you so much for telling me not to buy that. You saved me $30. And I'd say, yeah, it's probably best just to get them a game card and let them bowl because they're not tall enough to do the rock wall. They're not tall enough to do virtual reality. So I think that is, I guess, hopefully that's answering your question of when we get people involved, it's a better experience. And we do some of the food and beverage mobile ordering. We did some of that during COVID. And that to me had issues because people, oh, I forgot to put no such and such sauce on it, or I forgot to, oh wait, you didn't tell me it came with this. Well, yeah, I guess we forgot to put that on the website. So there were all these points of human interaction lost, and that I'm happy we're back to human interaction.
Yeah.
Excuse me, you and me both. Kyle, I'd love to switch gears just a little bit because you've taken on some leadership roles in your community in addition to what you're doing for your job. So I'm wondering if you can give us a little insight into that.
Sure. Our community, I live in Norman, it's a suburb of Oklahoma City, not a real large community. We're 100,000, so we're not a small town, but I think we're the third or fourth largest. I think we're third largest now in Oklahoma. And so, I've always wanted to give back. I've always enjoyed giving back. I think part of working with youth in our businesses kind of enables you to give back a lot because you hear about all their different stuff going on in their different organizations and you want to help. And then for us, it was that there's a lot of, it's a recruiting technique. If you're in the community and you're out and you're volunteering with those organizations, you find the good people a part of those and you bring them on board. And so I've done a lot of, volunteering in our Convention and Visitors Bureau and serving on the boards there and serving in our Chamber of Commerce. And, that's always been a great way to give back because the networking opportunities. And then politically, I've been kind of, it was pre-COVID was my first kind of stint in political career, which I didn't think I never wanted to be a politician. I still hope I never am considered a politician, but I did serve on city council for 3 years, about 3.5 years. And that was a tremendous experience, just learning about your city and civic duty. And it was an all of a sudden type deal. I was not looking to do it. I was not wanting to do it. It was, a guy called me up that I knew and said, hey, I'm about to announce that I'm resigning because I'm leaving town. I've got a new job in a different city. Would you be interested in running for my position on council? And I said, sure, sounds like fun. Was that famous last words? So I did that. And that was a really good experience because nothing is more rewarding than giving back to the town that you were raised in. And, just down to the parks and knowing that, hey, I grew up in that park and now we can improve it, and seeing our town grow to where you used to be able to drive across town in 5 minutes and now it's 15 minutes. Well, what does that do with roads and the sewer system and the water system and, um, economic development? And so that was a fun and very informative part of my time giving back to the community. And now, I don't really have a desire to be in politics, but I tell people if I was ever asked to help, I would. But I'm not going to say no. But now I've been able to still fulfill that little bit of niche that I love in through IAPA by serving on the government affairs committee. And so I'm able to do that. And that was very informative going into this post-pandemic time, as IAPA has really ramped up their public affairs involvement. And, knowing that there's so many things that are done on the local, state, and national level that impact us as business owners. And a lot of time it's really just they have not heard our voice. And so if a lawmaker or someone in a position that's making a decision, they didn't mean to do something that hurt a business or hurt a small business. They just didn't know the ramifications of what they were doing. And so that's why I love being able to give back and tell the story of the attraction industry to our lawmakers, whether it be locally or on the national level. Because we're a fun industry. And that's one thing too, they love to hear from us. It's not like we're, selling copy paper or selling coffins. We're doing something fun. And that's been kind of my way of giving back when it comes politically.
Was there anything that you learned serving on city council that then helped you as a business owner at Altitude 1291 of reframing your reference or knowing a little bit more kind of from the politics side of it that kind of helped that side too?
Yeah, we've used it, or I've used those skills a lot when it comes to more of the economic development side of things. What are the cities looking at? How do we expand and look at other locations? What tax incentives, what incentives did I work with when I was on council to attract businesses to town that maybe another city wants to attract a company like us to town? We've kind of been stalled a little bit over the last couple of years with the high interest rates, but my goal is to ultimately, grow with more locations. And so as we look to when the time is right, I've learned a lot on kind of the economic development side of incentives and tax rebates, and how do we go into a community that maybe doesn't have entertainment that is wanting it. And so they incentivize a company to come in, and that's happening every day with all kinds of companies, not just entertainment. And so I've learned a lot about that and used that kind of to my advantage in the past few years.
So Kyle, if somebody listens to this, I should say when somebody listens to this, I think you've given a lot of great insight into the way you lead and the way that you approach business. But I'm curious, is there anything else or anything specific that if somebody were coming to you and say, hey, I want to get into the FEC world, I wasn't born in it, but I want to get into it, it's something that seems exciting, what kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to always open your eyes and your ears and get out, get into, trade organizations, like IAPA, like BPAA, find ways to get immersed into industry before you spend your own money or before you spend millions of dollars. I like to say you're gonna spend some money, but before you make a big investment, and see if it's the right thing for you. This industry is not for everyone. Well, the hospitality industry in general, is not for everyone. And I've met people before that I've said, you probably shouldn't be in this industry. But there's a lot to get to know, and there's so many different versions of what we do in an FEC. There's so many different type, and they're all shapes and sizes and styles and investment levels, and really making sure that what you're doing will work. I mean, I think is the biggest. It's all, as an entrepreneur, it's all a bunch of risk. But can you mitigate that risk by talking to others who have done it or who have learned, like us, all the things we've done wrong? I'd love to say we've done way more things wrong than we've done right. So we'll share those when we can. And just learning about what you're doing, because ultimately, if I can help someone from making a mistake that I made, that's what I want to do. If I lost $50,000 doing this deal, let me tell you why you shouldn't do it. And hopefully you don't lose it. Or if I haven't figured something else out, I can ask. And our industry seems to be also very relationship based. And so, I know I could call up and ask you guys something sometime if I had a training issue or an issue that I knew you guys had expertise on, and you'd be happy to give it to me. And that's what I love about our industry is that I can call people and they're going to answer and tell me. And if they don't know, they're going to find someone who does know and tell me, hey, you need to call so and so. They know the answer or can help you with that. And so I always tell people who are getting in the business, just ask lots of questions, get immersed into the industry before you even make a large investment, and know that what you're doing is the right thing to do. Because I've seen a lot of formal financial feasibility studies, and I look at them and I said, man, my gut just doesn't agree with that. And I'll tell someone like, oh, I don't know if I agree with that, but maybe here's what I do agree on. And it's amazing when you put the human side into all of this, it's a lot different than the books and the financials. And so that's why I tell people to get involved and figure out what exactly they want to do before they break ground.
So Kyle, if you weren't in this industry, if you weren't born into hospitality and entertainment and entrepreneurship and small business, what do you think you'd be doing?
Um, you know, Gosh, that's hard. I think it'd be hard to not be in the hospitality business of some way. I thought at one point I wanted to be in the sports and entertainment world, but that's still kind of hospitality. So I'd have to say that I would love to be a coach of just people, be able to be out there and I don't know exactly if it would be a sport or if it'd be a team of employees or what it would be, but I think having that people aspect is the way that I love life. And that'd probably be where I'd be involved. If I had to do something else, it'd definitely involve people, and so it'd be a coach of some sort.
That's awesome. Well, I imagine you're already a coach to the people on your team and that you work with, whether you have that title or not, just because of the kind of person you are. So, Kyle, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a fascinating conversation. If people wanted to get a hold of you or learn more about your businesses, where would you send them?
Sure. The easiest way is probably hit up our website to figure out what we're all about at altitude1291.com. Our corporate event company that does all of the inflatables, games, and rides and company picnics is allisonsfuninc.com. So my email address is kyle@allisonsfuninc.com. So hit me up. Also, you can always find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, and I'm happy to help out any way I can.
Awesome. Kyle, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate the opportunity to learn about your businesses, but also your mindset and your leadership style and everything that surrounds that. So we really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you. And for everyone out there who's watching and listening, just remember, we are all attraction pros.